What I want to do in this video is to look at three seemingly, probably in your mind, totally unrelated events. And then what I'm going to do is to show you the common thread that runs through all three of these and connect them to what I think is a very important theme. And it's a theme that I haven't seen anybody in the media talk about. Now, I'm going to go through these events in chronological order. The first incident you may recall. You probably saw it on the news. You may have seen the video. I'm posting here an image to remind you. This was a story about prisoners in California who, rightly or wrongly, believed that if they contracted COVID-19, they'd be released. And there was video of the prisoners in a common area sharing masks, licking things, doing all kinds of things in an effort to contract COVID-19 with the expectation that that would get them out of jail. Now, most of the stories at the time looked at that as some sort of comment on the criminal justice system in California and how, idiotic it was and how they were handling COVID-19 and releasing folks. But when I saw that, there was something else that came to mind. What came to my mind was what these prisoners were telling us. Because what they were telling us was, from their individual perspectives, that their freedom, which they were hoping to get, to regain, was worth the risk of contracting COVID-19 and getting sick, perhaps even getting hospitalized, perhaps ending up in an ICU, perhaps ending up dead. They knew the risks of COVID-19. I mean, the risks were high enough that prisoners were being released. And yet here were these men, these weren't the best and the brightest in society, but even with their limited education and their limited prospects in life, you could argue, they understood the importance of their own freedom. And to secure that freedom, they were willing to risk COVID-19. They were willing to risk the possibility of sickness, perhaps even death, to regain their freedom. And I think that was a lesson they were showing us that people just missed. The second event I want to talk about are the protests in response to the killing of George Floyd. You had literally hundreds of thousands of people out there protesting. And what I'm talking about here are the peaceful protests. I'm not talking about the rioting. I'm not talking about the looting. I'm not talking about the arson. I'm talking about the people, the masses of whom were peaceful, did their marches, tens, hundreds of thousands of them across the country. They all knew that there was a risk of contracting COVID-19, just like those prisoners in California. They knew there was a risk. They might end up sick. They might end up hospitalized. They might end up in the ICU. They might end up dead. But despite those risks, they thought that the things they were protesting for, however you want to define them, and different people were protesting for different things, were worth that risk. Just like the prisoners who thought it was worth risking getting COVID-19 to regain their personal freedom, these people believed that it was worth risking COVID-19 to secure rights not just for themselves, but for others as well. And that's part of this common theme I'm developing in this video. The third group I want to talk about are the attendees of a Trump rally in Tulsa. That, as I'm recording this, it's going to be this evening. If you're watching this, it may have been yesterday. I don't know when I'll get this posted. If you see those people interviewed, they know, just like the protesters, just like the prisoners in California, that they are running a risk of contracting COVID-19, of getting sick, of ending up in the hospital, of ending up in the ICU, perhaps of dying. Some of the people I've seen in the lines are rather old, my age or seemingly older in some cases. And they know they're running those risks. They're not that stupid that they don't understand that. But just like the protesters in the George Floyd protest and the prisoners in LA, they believe that the issues that they're out there rallying for, not just to support Trump. It's bigger than that. I mean, you have a million people ask for tickets to this thing. I mean, a million that's twice the population of Tulsa, Oklahoma. A million is more people than the number who watch CNN at any given moment, which is usually 5 to 700,000. That's a lot of people. And they're there because they're protesting too. They know that if you're a Trump supporter and you go out and protest against the protesters, you know what's going to happen. If there's violence, you'll get blamed. We know when that happens. We've seen that happen. So you go to a Trump rally. That's a form of protest for these people. They're sticking it to the left. We don't care about COVID, just as you didn't care about COVID. We want to not change the system, we want to protect the system. And I'm not talking here about a system of racism as it's defined by the left, but as a system of individual rights, individual liberties that they see under threat from the left. That's their political view. It's different from the left, but it's still a political view. And I would argue it's a mainstream political view. And they value that as more important than the personal risks they run of contracting COVID-19. In that sense, they're just like the protesters, and they're just like the prisoners. And that's why I wanted to put this video together, because what the media is portraying as three seemingly unrelated events, to me, show a common thread. From the prisoners in the one extreme, through the protesters, to the Trump rally goers. All these people value political things, political points of view that differ in the extreme. As individuals and collectively, or just individuals for the prisoners perhaps, but all three of them, in an effort to secure their own freedom, their own liberty, even though they define it differently perhaps, are willing to risk getting sick, are willing to risk contracting COVID-19. And I think that's a really important point that we need to notice in the country, not just on the right, but on the left, and even among the population of prisoners. That's the value that people place on these liberties that we have, even if they want to implement them in different ways. And I think that's an important point. And the media is not talking about that. The media sees these things as three separate, totally unrelated events. I don't. I see them as three separate but related events that are telling us something about what's going on in this country. And how you want to define that, I'll leave that up to you. I once tweeted, only half jokingly, that George Floyd did more to get rid of the COVID-19 scare, at least, than Anthony Fauci. And I was only half joking, because it's true. I mean, it's true. This whole George Floyd response thing has led to, just the demolition of this idea that COVID-19 is so important we can and should give up our freedoms, which is what our political leaders and the experts were telling us. You need to lose your freedom so you can be secure from this disease. What the rally goers, what the protesters, what even the prisoners understand is that that's a false argument. That, it's the same thing that brings, I'm not comparing any of these groups to the people who stormed the beaches at Normandy on D-Day, but it's the same type of thing that led people to do that. I mean, if you're unwilling to risk your health, let alone your life, to secure liberty, to secure freedom, to secure rights, however you might define them, if you're unwilling to do that because you might contract COVID-19, how in the hell can you expect people to attack a beach or to climb the Pointe du Hoc cliffs, to try to get at the Germans? You can only understand that if you know that people value these things more than their health, often more than their life. I mean, at the end of the Civil War, I think by the end of the Civil War, something like around 15, maybe it was a little more, maybe it was a little less. Records are kind of not complete. You know, African Americans, freed slaves, joined the Union Army. And in the last 1864 and 1865, the Union Army is getting blacker and blacker. There are more and more black regiments. Why? Because these people, they were volunteering, they weren't being drafted. They volunteered to fight, to risk their lives, and many of them died. And if they were captured by the Confederates, I mean, forget it. They weren't going to be treated very well at all. In some cases, they were massacred. But they were willing for freedom to risk their lives. So I see that as a hopeful sign in this country, that people on all points of view are beginning to set aside this COVID-19 scare, that our health and safety is more important than our rights. And I think what they're all telling us, the prisoners, the protesters, and the rally goers, is that that's not true. That the American people still value their rights, however they conceive of them, as being more important than their personal health. They're willing to risk getting sick. Some of them are willing to risk the possibility that they'll die. And I think that's important. And that's what the media is not understanding. That's what they can't kind of grasp. And admittedly, I would say it's kind of difficult if you look at the three things to see what their relationship is, but that's it. You know, that's what I think it is. And, you know, you're welcome to your own thoughts and opinions. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification button so you know when I post new videos. And until the next time, I'm out of here. And have a happy Father's Day to all you fathers.